of Diddy like shooting people,
Yeah.
blowing up cars.
Yeah.
Is he this gangster that behind the scenes is that him? Or is that
Shout out to Wendy Williams.
And what's really going to be interesting is the parade of celebrities who we expect to be mentioned and or called into that courtroom. You know, people who we hadn't heard about prior, like Mike Myers, you know, Austin Powers, Mike Myers. Why is he getting called? Why is he on the witness list? That'll be fascinating. And then, of course, there are the no-name, quote unquote, women who are going to have to find every ounce of courage they have.
They called it a tragedy, a freak drowning, a rogue ocean current that pulled one of TV's most beloved icons under while he was simply enjoying a peaceful family vacation in Costa Rica. The headlines were somber. The tributes poured in. Everyone accepted it for what it looked like on the surface, a heartbreaking loss. But now, just weeks later, something shifted. Inside a Manhattan federal
the stuff that's happening with Wendy Williams, do you think this is all connection to?
Of course.
courtroom, quiet whispers are starting to rise, and they are not just rumors. They are suspicions. Because suddenly, people aren't asking how Malcolm-Jamal Warner died. They're asking why. Was it really just a tragic twist of fate, or was it the final move in a much darker game? A clean-up job cloaked in salt water and sympathy? The kind of silent erasure that happens when someone gets too close to something they were never supposed to know? And if that's the case, what exactly was Malcolm caught up in? And who needed him silent so bad?
Look, they once worked together a long time ago. They're not friends now. They don't like each other. And yeah, 50 has taken every shot, especially when Diddy has been dead.
Badly, they turn the beach into a crime scene. And here's where things start to get truly chilling. Explosive new claims from inside the Diddy trial have cracked open the Pandora's box. And suddenly, Malcolm-Jamal Warner's name is surfacing in a context no one expected. A context tied to the darkest corners of Diddy's alleged social empire. That same circle of untouchable elites, hidden power brokers, and industry gatekeepers. Warner, it turns out, didn't just brush past them at an award show. He crossed their path in a way that raised eyebrows, and maybe alarms. Sources say he wasn't just an accidental insider. He may have known too much. Quietly entangled, potentially on the edge of exposing something. And just like that, he ends up alone in open water. Drowned. The only witness? An unnamed man who tried to save him, then vanished into silence. No interviews. No press. Just a single quote, and then nothing. That's not just strange. That's calculated. So let's rewind the clock. July 20th. Playa Grande, Costa Rica. Malcolm-Jamal Warner, 54 years old, enters the water. Moments later, he's gone. Paramedics spent 20 agonizing minutes trying to bring him back. No pulse. The cause? Officially, asphyxiation by submersion. But now, whispers coming from inside the Diddy courtroom suggest this wasn't just a tragic fluke. Warner may have been a dangling thread in a much darker tapestry. And someone, somewhere, didn't want him pulling it apart. Because if that's true, then Malcolm didn't just die. He was silenced. The beloved big brother of America's living room, the soulful Grammy-winning musician, may have crossed a line, and that makes him dangerous. The timing only adds fuel to fire. Just weeks before his fatal trip, Warner had dropped season 2 of his podcast, Not All Hood. And this time, the tone was different. Sharper, edgier. His voice carried the weight of someone done being polite. He opened that season with co-host Keisha Knight Pulliam, talking survival, child stardom, and dignity. But listen closely. It wasn't just nostalgia. It was code. Malcolm was hinting, skating dangerously close to the truth. You could hear the tension, like a man standing on the edge of a reveal. People close to the podcast say he was planning to go even further, diving into the darker corners of the industry. How mentorship often means silence. How power is traded for obedience. How careers get chained to secrets. The show was just starting to peel back the polished Hollywood sheen when Warner disappeared into that water. Was it coincidence? Or was the podcast turning him into a target? And here's where things take an eerie turn. Ask anyone from the late 90s SMBC scene about Malcolm's link to the music world, and you'll get raised eyebrows. One former road manager for an LA label claims Warner was spotted at multiple Diddy compound gatherings in the early 2000s. He wasn't a regular, the source said, but he saw. He watched. Another bed insider says Warner once described a system he called weaponized mentorship, where young actors are promised success, then kept in invisible chains. None of that made it into the mainstream tributes. But here's where it gets downright bizarre. The one man who tried to save Warner in the water, the only witness, no name, no background, no follow-up, a ghost in the narrative, silent, just like the rest of this unraveling mess. A 29-year-old man from Nicaragua. That's all we know. No name, no photos, no press interviews. Just a brief statement from the Costa Rican Red Cross confirming he had been hospitalized in critical condition, then quietly released without a scratch. This man nearly drowned trying to save Malcolm-Jamal Warner, lived through it, and disappeared like smoke. No journalist tracked him down. No social media posts. Nothing. Authorities said he had no personal connection to Warner, so what was he doing there? He was on the beach early. Sunrise. Locals say he entered the water before anything went wrong. Not after the chaos started, but before. He wasn't a heroic bystander. He was already swimming nearby, watching, maybe waiting. Warner's body, they say, was eventually found hundreds of yards down the shoreline, wedged in a rocky cove. But the story doesn't add up. And it gets darker when you realize how Diddy's inner circle responded after Warner's name surfaced in court. They didn't. Total silence. Not a single denial. Not one PR push. Just radio silence. And that silence is deafening, especially in the middle of a federal trial that's blowing the lid off decades of manipulation, coercion, and blackmail in elite circles. If Warner saw something at one of those infamous parties, if he witnessed what others only whispered about, then he wasn't just a celebrity. He was a liability, a man with mainstream appeal, moral weight, and a podcast MIC, a truth teller with nothing left to lose. And that's what makes his timing so eerie. Because right before his death, Warner wasn't fading away. He was coming back into focus. Weeks earlier, fans saw him live on stage in Atlanta, bass guitar in hand, glowing with joy. Not a recluse, not retreating. This was a man reclaiming his voice, stepping into the light. He had a daughter to protect, a wife to live for, a legacy he was reshaping, which is why this loss doesn't feel random. It feels rehearsed. Because drowning? That's clean. But motive rarely is. Meanwhile, back in court, Diddy's lawyers tried to spin his past as consensual excess. But the judge wasn't buying it. He's still behind bars because enough evidence suggests something more sinister. So if Warner had plans to speak, to finally name names, then what happened in Costa Rica wasn't just a freak tide. It was a storm with a target. And the digital trail only adds fuel. His final posts, introspective, close-up portraits, melancholy captions, a reposted article on burnout. It read like a man making peace, or leaving clues. And here's what really stopped hearts. Keisha Knight Pulliam, his podcast partner and friend, broke her silence with a tribute calling him an angel. She promised to watch over our girls, a nod to how close their daughters had become. But in another story post, she wrote just one haunting line, "I've just needed a moment." And now fans are asking, was that grief or code? Was she struggling with more than loss? Was she hinting at a truth that doesn't match the official story? Let's talk about narrative. Because right now, one woman, known only as MIA, is testifying under court-ordered anonymity in the Diddy trial. No photos, no descriptions, total lockdown. But outside that courtroom, another thread is unraveling. One chilling Reddit post claimed a production assistant who worked with Malcolm-Jamal Warner in early June heard him say he felt watched. That post vanished within 24 hours, but not before screenshots caught a bombshell. Warner, allegedly, had just been contacted by a known Diddy associate promising him a massive comeback. That comeback never came. And now, Warner's name is being spoken in hushed tones, linked to a trial that's already exposing an elite circle long believed untouchable. According to those close to the case, Warner may have known too much, kept silent too long, and was finally ready to talk. But if that's true, he never got the chance. Because what once felt like a freak accident now feels like part of a playbook. And the more the timeline comes into focus, the more impossible it is to unsee the patterns. especially when the alleged rescuer still has no name, no face, and no voice. That man, 29 years old, from Nicaragua, nearly drowned trying to save Warner, then was discharged quietly. No interview, no explanation, just gone. Meanwhile, fans are left piecing together moments Warner shared before his death. Reflective social media posts, cryptic quotes, a podcast that had just started to peel back the industry's darkest layers. This was a man not in retreat, but rising. And then, silence. The kind of silence that doesn't just mourn, it erases, it sterilizes, it moves on. And for those closest to him, that silence stings. One clip caught the raw emotion of a fan. You don't know what it does to you when something you love is just thrown away like it didn't even matter. And that's what this feels like. Warner wasn't just another actor. He was a symbol of hope for kids who grew up in front of a screen. And now, he's gone, and no one's asking the right questions. The conversation has shifted. This isn't about one drowning in a more. It's about a machinery, a system that chews people up, strips them of their voices, and discards them when they stop playing along. Because if you zoom out far enough, you see the web. You see how these elite circles allegedly groomed young stars. How they promised mentorship but delivered manipulation. Warner wasn't just guided, he was observed. And when someone in that position starts podcasting about silence, exploitation, and revenge, that's not content. That's a threat. Names haven't been named yet in court filings, but in makeup trailers, green rooms, and award show rehearsals, the whispers are louder than ever. And Warner, he might have been ready to name names. And that's why this story isn't fading. It's expanding. Sources say Warner had cut back on public appearances in his final weeks. Booked private security. Canceled plans. These weren't the moves of a man chasing peace. These were red flags. Silent warnings. Protective instincts from someone who knew too well how things worked behind the curtain. The same curtain that protected powerful men for decades. The same curtain that only now, finally, begins to fall. And we circle back to his friend and podcast co-host, Keisha Knight Pulliam. Her tribute was poetic, but her language was specific. "We got our girls," she wrote. And then, "I've just needed a moment." Those aren't just words of grief. They're signals. They're coded pain. Insiders are now speculating that Warner may have taken steps to protect not only his own daughter, but Keisha's as well. From what exactly? That's a question nobody in power seems to want to answer. Because here's the ugly truth. Diddy might be in a jail cell, but the ecosystem that protected him still runs deep. Executives, agents, publicists, stylists, security teams. They didn't just look away. They helped build it. And the Warner story? That may be the first real crack in the wall. The sentencing may feel like the end. But what if it's only the beginning? What if Warner's death isn't just a tragedy, but a message? We have to prove that he violated the law. But behind closed doors, whispers around Malcolm-Jamal Warner's inner circle paint a much darker picture. Private conversations with family included hushed warnings, cryptic mentions of being watched, and fears that ghosts in the past were resurfacing. One close confidant, who asked to remain anonymous, said Warner was seriously considering disappearing from public life by year's end, retreating to focus on fatherhood and detach from the spotlight. If true, that's not a retirement, it's a retreat, a silent exit plan in motion. And it begs the question, what or who was he running from? What deepens the unease as a vacuum left behind? No statements, no interviews. People once active on social media, ghosted. Even Keisha Knight Pulliam, warm, honest, usually so present, has been unusually reserved. Her tributes are short, heartfelt, and deliberate. No names, no context. It's the kind of silence that suggests knowledge too dangerous to speak aloud. If Warner told them something, if they are carrying secrets he never got to share, then this wasn't just a personal loss. It was a message, written between the lines and sent out as a warning. And while the public mourned, the courtroom cracked open. Because just as Warner teased deeper podcast conversations about industry abuse, Diddy's legal team was scrambling. Motions filed. Time reductions begged for. They argued he was being unfairly punished for consensual arrangements. But buried inside the government's evidence Something far darker. Coercion. Spectacle. Control. One woman said she was pushed into a scenario for optics, not intimacy. Another described being handled like a pawn. One investigator called it corporate-level manipulation disguised as entertainment. Now imagine Malcolm knew something. Not because he was involved, but because he saw. He heard. He was trusted. Warner wasn't just an actor. He was a symbol of safety. Theo Huxtable, a face people confided in. And what happens when someone like that gets close to the truth? One producer who worked with him on a 2011 reboot remembered Warner saying, offhandedly, Diddy's got too many people watching people. It didn't seem like an accusation at the time, but today, it lands different, especially when you realize many of Diddy's alleged enablers still walk free. And Warner? Well, multiple court watchers claim his name was quietly referenced in pre-trial metadata sweeps. Documents not made public. A paralegal told reporters Warner's name showed up in email traces during the investigation. That's not random. That's proximity. Was he just adjacent to the fire, or on the verge of becoming a witness? We don't know, but if he were preparing to speak, really speak, then his vanishing begins to feel like more than just bad timing. It feels surgical, as if someone feared what he might say with that MIC in his hand. Even the industry's quiet gestures feel loaded. One veteran stylist who'd worked with both Warner and Diddy posted a candle emoji and the words, "Not unexpected, but still hurts." Then deleted it. No names, no explanation, but a scream between the pixels. And then came the digital smoke signals. Fans noticed Warner's final podcast upload had glitches, audio skips, time gaps, missing segments. Some now believe those edits happened posthumously. A few forums even claim Warner's laptop, retrieved by family, held a list of names he no longer trusted. Names that, if leaked, could burn entire networks to the ground. And here's the scariest part. Maybe this wasn't random. Maybe Warner wasn't a loose thread. They saw him as an open tab, and someone decided to close it. Not because he broke the law, but because he might have exposed the ones who did. It was never about silencing a criminal. It was about silencing a man of credibility. And if that's a playbook, then who else is on that list? Who else knows too much and hasn't been silenced yet? That's the part that hurts. The ones who fight to tell the truth don't always make it. The voices that comforted us growing up, they get cut off mid-sentence. And the people in the shadows, the ones who helped build the system, they pivot, they wait, they survive. And when the dust settles, they rebuild the same house, just with different curtains. So now we ask, if Malcolm-Jamal Warner didn't just drown, then who's next? What other stories are ticking time bombs? Drop your theories in the comments, because this isn't over. The silence, that's just the start. Until next time, stay alert, stay sharp, and never stop looking behind the smiles. This isn't TV. This is real,